Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my AM reading video for Friday, January 14th, 2022, which I am hoping to actually get up on Friday for once. It's early enough, I think, in this filming schedule on Friday. I actually attempted to film this video much earlier in the morning and definitely would have gotten it up today, but I had some technical difficulties, so alas, I am back to redo the video, probably a little faster, which is probably a good thing because I rambled for about a half hour the last time, so of course now I'm rambling on again. This is my first am reading update of the new year, so well, first of all, that means I probably have more books to talk about anyway in this update, and second of all, this is the chance I take to plug my literary newsletter that I do every month. And my latest was my December 2021 newsletter. In it, I include snippets from my Goodreads reviews of all the books I've read last month. I have bookish news that caught my fancy. I have a book pick. I have a new section now for a book quote from my favorite read of the month, and all sorts of good stuff linked down below. The first thing I will talk about in this video is my ongoing segment of reading a short story from Dorothy Parker's collection of short stories, which I started last spring, and doing one per am reading update I will be doing throughout the rest of this year as well, which is kind of exciting and fun. Anyway, the story I read for this week is called But the One on the Right, which she wrote or published in 1929. It is a dashed-off story at a dinner party, which is sort of her MO, but this is not one of my favorites. I like the ones that are more third-person interactive between the two characters who are talking, but this one really is inside the head of this woman who's seated at a dinner party next to a man who's really boring her, and she just can't stop talking about how boring she finds him, but there's a lot of funny witticisms in it as well, at least. She desperately would rather talk to the man on her left, who she calls a Greek god to the Trojan horse she's talking to, and she just keeps going on and on about how this guy will only talk about the food menu with her, while meanwhile making no attempt to talk about anything else herself. So, it's another one of her protagonists who just is completely clueless about her own personality and how her affectation, who she is. But it's not as fun, really, just for her to, lampoon on this completely clueless woman inside her head. I prefer the back and forths. The first official book I finished in 2022 is actually an audiobook. This is She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan, which I listened to on my library's Libby account. And I chose this book. I heard about it first last summer through virtual San Diego Comic-Con. It was one of the books that the publishers were, marketing highly, and since then it's also become just generally very popular, I think, in the sci-fi world. It is a gender-bent retelling of basically the changeover from the Mongol dynasty in China in the Middle Ages to the Ming dynasty, looking at the emperor who basically took over, who had a rags to riches story in real life. He started out like as a starving peasant, and then he became, a humongously powerful ruler. But Parker Chan decided she also wanted to put gender into the mix, and made her character, Zhu Chongba, is a woman in disguise who takes on her brother's identity and the prophecy he's given by a fortune teller to do something great. And meanwhile, she's supposed to come to nothing, which I guess in a technical way maybe she is, because no one knows, or very few people know, who she really is. This is a duology, so actually she's not on the throne yet, but I assume that's a spoiler that's not really a spoiler. She has made huge strides in this book, starting as the starving peasant who was almost sold to bandits for food, and then her father and her brother die, and she decides, I don't want to join them, and she ends up going to a place she knows has food, a monastery, and she, has to show a lot of perseverance even to get her foot in the door as a boy, let alone a girl. And from there, after a while, she joins a guerrilla group, an indigenous guerrilla group called the Red Turbans, who are basically looking to seize control from the Mongol dynasty, because a lot of people are not doing well under them. And I have to say, this storyline in general, it took a while to grab me, just because Ju was the only really fleshed out or interesting character at all, so it wasn't as intriguing, you know, when she's the only one worth following. But then we meet General Ouyang on the Mongol dynasty side, although technically he's not a Mongol either. He is indigenous, and in fact the Mongols killed his entire family and castrated him, and he's playing a long road game to revenge. So that's intriguing, certainly, and even better, of course, is that, you know, he has mixed feelings after growing up with this particular family, and he has feelings for one of the sons, one of the princes. So it's could be compelling stuff. Then the gender and queer aspects come in about, well, this man is a eunuch, and there's a lot of shame in his society about that, and he has a lot of he's ashamed of his urges for men. He's misogynistic toward women, and Ju on the other side is a little more okay with herself. I think it takes a little longer for her to kind of accept her female side, at least privately, although then she does end up marrying a woman she is in love with who knows her real identity. But we have those sort of two opposites in a way about queer acceptance, personal queer acceptance. So yeah, and I mean, on top of that, you know, it's fast-paced, it's fun, there's a really incredible amount of world building. It's nice from a you know, from my own POV of not knowing much about China's real history to garner a little bit about that as well. And there's a lot of intriguing characters. So I do think I grew into the book, and I am looking forward to reading the next part when it comes out. I'm going to try to draw connections between the 4 books I read in the last couple weeks, maybe shaky ones at best, but this book has something in line with the title of the last one. This is called City of the Sun by Juliana Maio, and it is historical fiction about Egypt during World War II, specifically in 1941. We're following a cast of characters around. We're following a U.S. reporter named Mickey. He's there to report on the ground as the Nazis are sort of closing in. You know, they haven't taken over Egypt, but they're certainly closing in, and the British aren't always doing so well against them. And his whole point really of being here to report on the ground is to try to encourage the U.S. to enter the war. But then the U.S. Embassy actually commandeers him to like use his credentials as a front to look for this German Jewish nuclear scientist called Erich Blumenthal, who they understand is has moved into the area. And then we're also following a little less a Nazi spy, Kessner, who is also looking for Erich Blumenthal. And then we're following Maya, who is a young woman who Mickey gets involved with, who is a German Jewish refugee. And what do you know? She's actually Erich's sister. But Mickey and Maya, you know, are not telling each other the entire truth. So it takes a long time for them to figure this out, this connection. This is fast-paced historical fiction, and I guess I can give it a pass for a lot of info dumping because we have a bunch of characters who are very interested in keeping up with current affairs, so they keep on, you know, keeping themselves abreast of things. And we get a fair bit into the Jewish community in Egypt. Erich and Maya and their father, you know, they left Germany for their lives and ended up in Egypt staying with family until they get papers to illegally cross into Palestine, because at this point the Brits have closed Jewish immigration to Palestine. And then meanwhile the Jewish community in Cairo and in Egypt broadly is well established. They feel very safe with their Arab neighbors and also with the British. So they don't have as much problem with the Brits as, you know, imperial colonists, basically. They fit in well. Certainly the characters in this book fit in well into the glitzy, westernized Cairo. But then on the other side, of course, we have the Arabs, who are chafing a lot more under this oppression, and some of the minor characters in this book are in fact real life figures, like the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, and then Anwar Sadat, who became the president of Egypt ultimately. And then Maio herself is actually an Egyptian Jew, but she and her family were evicted from the country in 1956 during the Suez Crisis, when a lot of Jewish families were evicted at that time. So this is, I think, her way to sort of cast a little bit of a light onto that history and heritage, also with, you know, this kind of fun, I say, mystery plot of trying to find Eric Blumenthal. It kind of reminded me of All the Light You Cannot See by Anthony Doerr, which was published around the same time as this book. And it also included a Nazi spy, von Rumpel, who was after, well, he was after like an immortal jewel. That book is, of course, much better well known. This one was actually published by a small press, so I will leave a link to that down below to, you know, prop up small presses. Get this one a little bit more well known too. I could be a little bit of a snob and talk about how the writing is plotty and workmanlike, and the prose is especially purple when it comes to the romance between Mickey and Maya, but it is an engaging story. My next connection between two books is even more slight. It's just we're moving over to Egypt's neighbor. Can we talk about Israel? This is a nonfiction book I read as an ebook on my iPad for my Jewish, my Israel book club with my synagogue. Sorry about all the lighting craziness here, but anyway. Daniel Sokatch is the CEO of a nonprofit, the New Israel Fund, which looks to promote like progressive democratic values in Israel. They align themselves a lot with grassroots organizations, basically looking to promote democratic values on the ground. So his bias with this book is that this is a very Israel-centric book. It does focus more on the Jewish history than the Palestinian history, although he acknowledges that history. But his focus on Israel is focusing on Israel as the flawed democracy that it is. So he focuses on that history and what led to, well, most seriously, the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza, about the military history and policies. He's really trying, I think he's embodying the ethos of being a progressive pro-Israel diaspora Jew who shows the warts and all to show that he is aiming for a more democratic Israel and, you know, a return to this two-state solution. So that is where he's coming from in this, and that's why it really focuses very more predominantly on Israel, less so on Palestine, except in relation to Israel. It can be a contentious book because the conflict is that fraught, and so even in a Zoom call with a bunch of Jews at my synagogue, I mean, I think most people were progressive, and such as myself, and we all really liked the book. There were other people who were more to the right, who were more defensive about what Sokatch shone a light on. Beyond the history, he also talked more generally about concerns to the broader Jewish community, like BDS, the Boycott, Divest, Sanctions movement, and also some of the verbiage that we get stuck on, anti-Semitism where it does and doesn't apply, apartheid, and if that does or doesn't apply, and etc. And I think he does try to give both sides, like he acknowledges both sides of everything, but certainly his focus is more on Israel, but the warts and all sort of focus on Israel, not nearly as cherry-picked idealistic as the last book we read in my Israel book club. So I liked it. It was certainly challenging. I wrote a big review about it on Goodreads, which goes into more detail, but I guess I've said pretty much all I feel like I need to say here. I would suggest it, I suppose. I mean, this conflict is so fraught, it's hard to suggest books about it because most everybody comes in with their own agendas, but I really do feel like this one is nuanced in its way with its focus. It's Israel, warts and all focus. And finally, sticking with the theme of Judaism and book clubs, I've read Something Wild by Hanna Halperin, which I've read for my JCC-based book club, which is meeting next week to discuss this book. And I think this actually is my favorite book of the four. Anyway, this is a contemporary fiction book following two adult women, Nessa and Tanya, their siblings, who go to their mother's house. She's about to move with her husband to a new place, and so they're there to basically get rid of their old junk and, help her pack and that sort of stuff. But while they're there, staying overnight, they realize something they hadn't known before, that their stepfather is physically abusive toward their mother, and in fact they have to take her to the hospital after he attacks her. And the rest of the story, largely from there, is about the sisters in their own ways, trying to encourage the mother to stay away from Jesse and to press charges against him. And then there's backstory, especially with Tanya and Nessa as the main characters. It can't all just be about their mother, Lorraine. They had a sexual abuse experience in their teen years, which throughout the narrative they grapple with in their own ways as well. So it's another fraught novel, but Halperin has an interesting background. After she got her MFA in fiction, she did not go into academia. She became a domestic abuse counselor. And so she knows a lot more than I do from personal experience about domestic abuse, but I certainly bought Lorraine and why she acted the way she did. She has been in this marriage and been being abused for 10 years and has not left for various reasons having to do with the codependency and the psychological manipulations Jesse has her under. And just that shame as well, the shame of knowing that, or feeling that if she admitted to everything, people would look down on her like, why didn't you leave a long time ago? People don't like to air their dirty laundry like that. I think that's the whole point of that sort of victimhood. So I really liked that part of the story. It was harrowing, but very true. I also liked, in general, this is a book about female sexuality, and the Something Wild pertains to this thing that Nessa and Tanya started going through starting in their teen years, which is when they started applicating a sense of power to their sexuality. And that's what leads them into this abuse that they suffered themselves as teenagers. I want to discuss it with my book club. I'm curious what they think. The specifics of that abuse, I'm not sure it rings entirely true because it involves a stranger and other specific spoiler stuff that I thought didn't really ring entirely true. But everything else around it about the messaging that Tanya and Nessa got from society and from their parents, they have their father who left their mother for a younger woman, and their mother who spends most of their teen years gussying herself up for Jesse's attention like it's the most important thing. It's the message that the most important thing a woman has to offer is sexual attraction for men. And so that's what leads into this something wild sexual power that gets out of control. And it's just a commentary about women and sexuality and the messages we get starting as young girls. It reminded me a fair bit of reading My Dark Vanessa for the BookTube Prize, and in fact Kate Elizabeth Russell blurbed this book. So there's that. I also listened to this author on a podcast which I enjoyed, and she talked about how actually this started as a short story about the sexual abuse case, and then it turned into this novel, which I would say is technically more about Lorraine's abuse, because, that's the present storyline. But it's fascinating to see how, stories grow. Maybe that's the writer in me, but I'll link that podcast down below. And there is also Jewish content. Surprise, surprise, I'm reading it for a Jewish book club. It's similar to a lot of contemporary fiction that it's tangential in large part, like, oh, this happens to be a Jewish family. That Nessa and Tanya's father was Jewish and raised them in the tradition, but once he left the family, that tapered off. But then Tanya, in fact, marries a Jewish man, Eitan, who was formerly religious. So there's actually more Judaism, especially in Tanya's identity, than is normal for these sorts of books. So that was also intriguing, and it lent, that sort of dimension to Tanya, and then Nessa had her own dimension and stuff going on. So I do feel like there was a lot of good stuff in this book. I got invested, I got teary. Obviously it is a fraught subject, but that's why all of that coming together, I think I'm saying this is my favorite read of the last couple weeks. So that about covers it for me now. Haven't run out of battery yet, though the icon looks like it's getting there soon, so I should wrap it up. I have a holiday weekend coming up for Martin Luther King Day, and hoping to go to the writer's salon in my area to work on my own writing. Other than that, I don't think I have that much going on, so plenty of time to get more reading done. I still have a fair bit more I want to read this month, and we're already halfway through it. What do you know? And speaking of adding more books to my TBR, expect me back on this channel soon to talk about my BookTube spin, number 5, which Rick McDonnell already posted that video, and I already watched it this morning. The whole thing with that is that participants post a list of 20 books they want to read, and then Rick spins a spinny thing, and we have to read the corresponding book to the corresponding number, so fun times. Anyway, I hope you are all enjoying your reading pursuits from these past couple of weeks. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.